Hi there, it's Kevin with the Rogue Deck Builder here with this week's episode of the market, Monday on a Tuesday, possibly on a Wednesday. I'm getting to it, a little bit behind this week with all of the Ikoria orders coming out. Man, owning a local game store is such a headache, especially when sets are moved back. So, spent all yesterday trying to get everything situated away, and now I got some time to actually do the market Monday. So, this week, I'm going to talk about the reserve list because there's actually a lot of action with the reserve list. And I think it's a good time to get in on a few cards that have bottom backed out. And I'll show you my reasoning why. So there have been MTG Finance, the evil people over at MTG Finance, you know, those greedy, horrible, awful speculators that ruin the game, are at it again with buying out specific cards. And usually when this sort of behavior starts, then there are targets that are just a little bit behind. So some of the cards that I've noticed have started to become bought out are the cards like Grim Monolith has had a huge increase lately, especially the foils. So this one is being targeted. And this is the whole reasoning with these buyouts for reserve lists. So you can tell that these happen pretty much cyclical. So this one happened in April of 2018, and then we have it looks like May, April of 2019, then there was another buyout. And to see how this is cyclical on tax returns, and of course this time around with the stimulus package, that people then spend their tax returns on buying out reserve lists, and then there is some price correction, and then they go back down in value, then there's another buyout, and there's some price correction, and then there's another buyout when tax return comes around. So if you actually follow this trajectory, you can see though that the Grim Monolith was naturally increasing at this sort of rate here. So it would eventually be from February of 2018 to February of 2019, it would have increased naturally from about 70 to $100. And the same thing could probably be said about from February 2019 to February 2020 would have gone from 100 to 120. So we do have that about 20% price increase per year for this particular reserve list card. And that probably is true across the board for cards such as Grim Monolith. So this is how spikes work. And I think I need to educate the population of how MTG Finance works and how speculators aren't the most evil, vile, awful creatures ever to exist, and how it's a myth that they really control the prices of Magic the Gathering, because speculators are just like any other person. They are looking to buy and sell, and so they have to find a buyer, a non-speculator buyer, for the things they actually speculated in. So all roads will eventually come back to where the true price of a card is. So all speculators do is they temporarily increase the price, or they accelerate the price of where it naturally should be. There are sometimes undervalued cards, and that's what I try to do at my Rogue Market channel, to say, whoa, this card's actually undervalued if you look at the spread between this card and a buy list card on Card Kingdom or Star City Games. The TC player, the eBay price, is lagging behind, and therefore the true price of this is actually a lot higher than what is being reflected on these particular outlets. And therefore you should buy this card because it's going to increase in value. Eventually, it's going to get there. And so speculators often get blamed for price increases when really all they do is accelerate the price of getting to where it should be. And if they do cause a price to go up in value where it shouldn't be, then eventually the market readjusts and corrects itself. So we are going to most likely see another price correction with Grim Monolith over the next 6 months to 9 months, to where it should go back down to what I would assume would be 140 to 160. And so good example of how these things happen. So there have been some buyouts recently with many other cards. Another one I want to showcase is Gilded Drake. This is another one that's had that buyout here. So you can see the same thing with tax season that year. It missed last year, really didn't increase last year. A little bit last year during the tax return, but this one has been bought out again, or it was just low supply and people did pick up the copies that were low on the various outlets. So this Gilded Drake has gone back up, and it probably should have some price adjustments. So let's get into some cards that are most likely going to have spikes again due to low supply and due to the fact that there have been some price adjustments back to coming down to where they should be, and I think they're going to be good investments going up further. So the first one is, if you can always go to EDH Rec and start to look at cards that see a lot of play in their commander formats, and you can also look at cards that are currently seeing play in the various commanders that are coming out. The first one I want to talk about is the Time Spiral. This card is actually seeing quite a bit of play in the new Wheel commander. So Time Spiral being removed from the game, each player shuffles their hand and library. Time Spiral's not banned in Commander, is it? So someone needs to correct me if this is actually banned. I don't think it is. It's not banned in Commander, I do believe. It's still legal. So Time Spiral, I think, is going to have a massive price increase. So we can see here that it got bought out and went all the way up to 83, and then the price readjusted back to 65, and then there was a buyout again to 75, and then this one actually adjusted back, clear back down to 55. So I think if you were to follow this natural trajectory here, Time Spiral should be a lot higher. I think now it justifies being at the $80 price tag. So I think the Time Spiral is going to naturally go up to about $80 due to just the demand, the new cards that want wheel effects. If it's not banned, I can't remember off the top of my head. Not going to look it up at the moment. This should go up in price. That's the first one. The next one I want to draw attention to would be some of these color-specific cards that see a ton of play. So the first one's Copy Artifact. Copy Artifact has been bought out, though, so that the price increase is going to correct. If this has a huge correction, I think that this one is definitely another buys. So if this goes back down to like the $30 mark, Copy Artifact is a great card to get in on, because this is a card that naturally does increase in value. And this one, though, was a bad example because it did just barely spike up in price. However, if we go back to some of the cards below it, let's look at Replenish. So Replenish is one of those that did get bought out on the last two tax seasons, and has had some adjusting, and now it's flattened out. So we just had an enchantment-based set too, and we've had a lot of I do believe there is an Enchantment Matters. Yeah, okay, so Theros does have some Enchantment Matters commanders, and this is a theme that is going to be very common with Commander going forward, is these Enchantment Matters. So Replenish, return all enchantment cards from graveyard to play, is a very, very powerful ability for 4 mana, and I think that it's hit its low, at least its 6-month, 8-month low, and this one is going to increase in price. If we go underneath it, there's even a better one, which is going to be the Academy Rector. This one is surprising that it's back down, and you can see it's already starting to go back up in value. It missed last year's tax return buyout, but the year before it had a huge increase from 47 to about 100 down to about 85, and now it's gone all the way down to 42. This one also is very interesting that the Theros didn't spike the value of Academy Rector, because Academy Rector this is a card that if you have the money for this card for EDH, you should be running this in every white deck, because without exception, there's going to be white card that you can throw in your deck and just be busted with Academy Rector. I'm trying to think of the version of Grave Pact, Martyr's Bond. Martyr's Bond is crazy with Academy Rector. So Academy Rector says when it goes to the graveyard, you exile it, and then you can search your library for an enchantment card and put it into play. So you can get any enchantment regardless of its converted mana cost and put it into play. How it works with auras is auras then come into play and then they need to attach with something. So with the more busted auras out there, Academy Rector actually works very well with those. Take auras out of the equation, and then cards even like Martyr's Bond, Academy Rector ends up being a tutor for the specific enchantment you need. And there's some really busted enchantments that combo. Even think of it in white, some of the most recent things. The Academy Rector are going and getting something even like what's the enchantment that creates the treasure tokens every time your opponent draws a card, or simply the Anointed Procession. Those type of cards Academy Rector can go grab. And this one is something when I build commander decks that shows up at a high quantity. Basically every time I use white, Academy Rector goes in the deck. A very, very strong card for what it does. So this one I think is a very good pickup right now, a very good place to park some money for reserve list. If we go down even lower to some of the cards that have hit their lows and actually see a lot of play in the new commanders, there is the Memory Jar. So where's Memory Jar? This one is also surprising that it hasn't had a price spike. So Memory Jar is another wheel effect. So it says sacrifice Memory Jar. Each player sets aside his or her hand face down and draws 7 cards. and at the end of the turn they discard those cards. So what I like about Memory Jar is it works on commanders that both want to discard cards as well as want to draw cards. So the new commander that's coming out triggers off of opponents drawing cards, and Memory Jar is just perfect with it. With Narset still being legal in Commander 2, this is just a justification you could put in any blue deck, is like Narset and Memory Jar wheel type effects, as it makes it so your opponents basically just draw one card, and then they have to discard their card hand anyway at the end of their turn. So I guess they set it aside though. So never mind. It doesn't quite work with the Narset wheel. But it still does trigger off your opponent's discarding cards and drawing cards with a plethora of commanders over time. And again, this one is very, very. I'm surprised that this Memory Jar has gone down. In fact, though, I have looked. The TC market price a couple days ago was $11 because the spread was basically non-existent when I was looking at this card for Card Kingdom. So it does look like there's some movement between Memory Jar and the TC market price. So keep your eye on this one. It does have multiple printings from the Vault Relics. This one would be the better spec, in my opinion, for the foil version. And it does, again, appear to be some movement with the Card Kingdom buy list being at 13. Yeah, this was 14 the other day. So the TC market price has been increasing because this one was 14 and 13 and 11 and 10 respectively. So I do expect Memory Jar to start increasing in value once those Ikoria commanders come out, and people are going to be adding this to the Snake Wheel commander. I think it actually worked with one other card pretty well too of the commander cards coming out. But again, this theme is very, very often that they print commanders that work with drawing cards. And yeah, I do expect Memory Jar to start moving up in value. So that is kind of the theory of how I invest in reserve lists. I haven't been the greatest proponent of investing in reserve lists because they do have these sort of ebb and flows that, I mean, they have some very high price spikes and then they crash, then they spike and then they crash, and they spike. So you have to be really keen on getting in on the lows and selling out on the highs because inevitably they follow these trajectories. There are staples like Tithe too that I believe are always good pickups when they do flatten out. This is another card that can be justified going in any white commander, as you can just search for a plains card. And if you have fewer lands than your opponent, you get to search for an additional plains cards. It says plains, you can get dual lands, you can get shock lands, you can get any of them that actually, the new Triumph lands count as plains. And so these are very, very good cards just to throw in for mana fixing, or it's a 2-for-1 if you just use the instant speed when your opponent actually has a land. So keep that in mind. You can still crack it in response to a fetch land being cracked on yours, that you have fewer lands than your opponents, and then have this actually resolve before your fetch land resolves. There are a lot of little tricks with Tithe to make it work. So this is another good pickup right now. You can see I have the exact same tax return spike, readjust, tax return spike, readjust. We can look down at some of these other cards that are low. Anvil of Bogarden is a definite pickup right now. This one also surprises me because it deals with drawing cards. So it's also one you can proactively put out before you cast your commander. And so Anvil of Bogarden goes in many, many draw, discard type outlets, type shells. We got many of them that were just from Throne of Eldraine and Theros were a couple of commanders that dealt with discarding. So new sets are always going to work with this. And this is what I like about Anvil is is that double dipper. Works with Narset. That does have the ability to trigger off of drawing and discarding. Let's look at a few other ones here for the reserve list. Excuse me, man. Don't know what got into me. All right, so I typically do like this range of, like the $10 to $15 range for reserve list. I think that's your best potential increases. And there are still some good ones here. And we are running out. Like Karn Silver Golem also, I believe, was at its low it's at its like 6-month low. This one also seems kind of interesting. This used to be a very, very popular commander. That I'm going to have a rant video about commander. Why? I mean, this is a specific thing that Karn used to be such a clutch commander. It used to be such a very, very popular. And it's just been outclassed and outshined for colorless commanders by all this nonsense that they've printed for commander. But I still think it's a great option for people that are looking for like an old school commander that still does have some power. So it turns a non-creature artifact is an artifact creature with power toughness equal to its casting cost. People use Karn Silver Golem also to destroy opponents' artifacts. So turn it into a creature, and then you can turn all your opponent's artifacts into creatures, and then board wipe, for example. And it can also turn your own artifacts into creatures and allow them to have some crazy combos to that now that they become creatures, like giving your Aetherworks and why can't I think of the card? The one that you can actually have it deal damage if you have 40 or more life. You can pay life to then do that damage to your opponent. What is that called one? The Reservoir. Aetherworks Reservoir or Reservoir? Something Reservoir. Anyway, with Karn, you turn it into a creature, and then you have the other card that gives your creatures lifelink, and then it shoots your opponent, and then you gain that life back, and then you kill all of your opponents. So Karn is a classic in Commander, and I think also this one's a very, very good pickup. Cards even like Palincrone I saw were at their where is Palincrone here? So Palincrone. Yep, Palincrone I believe was at its 6 month low. Another card that is a classic in many blue decks with being able to untap lands. So if you have any of the Keru or the bounce lands that add for more than 1 mana, you can go infinite with Palincrone very easily with untapping 7 lands, and then returning it to your hand, then recasting it. It's a mainstay in commanders like Animar. It goes crazy with blinking. So when you blink Palincrone, you untap 7 lands. If you have things like Deadeye Navigator, you just go infinite at that point. So there's a lot of ways to abuse Palincrone, and it's been a mainstay in Commander for a while. Cards like Humility too are at their 6 month low. This is also a very popular Commander card. This is another one that also does have that synergy with tutoring up a specific enchantment I mentioned earlier. We could look at things even like Helm of Obedience. Helm of Obedience is at its 6 months low. So I guess the whole point of this, and we're just going to kind of keep this Market Monday a bit short, is there are a lot of good targets. Best way, EDH Rec, look at specific cards that are coming out in the new Commander decks, compare them with their 6 month, 12 month lows with reserve list, and it gives you an overall perspective of what cards are probably good to get in on. And this is just another thing you can add to your arsenal for the MTG Finance. My channel, especially this channel as well as my Rogue Market, I wouldn't say it's more geared toward the big gurus that are flipping cards. I like to say that my channels are more about managing your collection. And one of the things about managing your collection is actually getting in on cards at their lows and trading them at their highs. You don't have to sell. You don't ever have to even deal with the side of actually, buying and selling for actual currency. One of the ways that I was able to at the early days of Rogue Deck Builder, I was broke. I was dead broke. I've talked about it before on this channel that I just came out of a horrible relationship. I was in $30,000 to $40,000 of debt. It was right after that was the big recession that occurred, and I lost my job and had to scramble and get another job. And I just didn't have money to be spending on all of the different rogue brews. And at that time I was also traveling, and my whole goal was to be competitive and still do it uniquely. So that's how Rogue Deck Builder was born. I was trying to be as competitive as possible with the most unique builds as possible and try to prove that you can make pro tours and you can be successful with rogue brews. And I think I proved it in the early days. Won a PTQ, top 8'd another PTQ, day 2 to pro tour, all with my own unique way of playing Magic the Gathering. But it wasn't cheap, and it required a lot of cards, and it required me to be very savvy with managing my collection. And one of the ways of doing that was to really know the market and get in on cards at their low and trade at their high. And fortunately, I lived in Salt Lake City at the time. There were many game stores, and so I would just bounce between game stores with my trade binders and be able to do savvy trades. And keep in mind, this was post smartphones. Like, smartphones changed the way that you traded with Magic the Gathering. I used to make a killing pre-smartphones back in the Mirrodin days, back in the original Ravnica days, going between groups, going between Commander players and trading. Well, I guess it wasn't Commander at that time. It was more there were still the casual players that wanted their casual cards, trading them casual cards for competitive cards, then going to the competitive group and trading them competitive cards for casual cards, and just rinse and repeat. And this is pre-smartphone days where people didn't really care about price. They just cared about, what they wanted. And man, I remember it was at the not Ravnica, but Dissension. No, the one in between that. Why can't I think of the set in between Ravnica and Dissension? I was at the pre-release, and they actually held it at the fairgrounds in Salt Lake. So it was a massive pre-release. It was just, instead of having specific store pre-releases, they were like a day behind. We had like a convention for pre-releases, and I remember that specific day of just like flipping Dark Confidants for Loxodon Hierarchs for there was like a very casual card at the time period. I can't think of the dragon that existed in that time, or there was a demon. Going to the casual players and flipping them for Dark Confidants, and then just doing that all day long. And I didn't even play in the pre-release event. All I did was flip cards and was able to amass like a couple $1,000s in profit through trades. So, I mean, those days are long gone. You can't really do them without smartphones. You go to like a GP and you still have the issue of everyone, going on their smartphones and wanting penny for penny value, but there is still money to be made, or at least value to be gained, by doing this with knowing which cards are probably going to go up and which cards are probably going to go down, and being very savvy with that sort of information. And that's where I try to utilize this Rogue Market channel as well as the Market Monday by analyzing these sorts of things and be able to manage that collection. You don't even have to ever deal with fees and shipping and all that nonsense. So if you do have that access to trade, you should be utilizing it. And what I found is people love to trade. It's actually one of the appeals to collectible card games is people love to have trade binders and find people to like, hey, what are you looking for? Well, I'm looking for this. It's part of that social aspect to the game. Another thing with psychology that I've determined with people is when you initiate a trade with someone, they want to trade. They don't want to come out empty-handed, and you can use that to your advantage as well by not really being picky on what cards you are offering. All things are available if the price is right. And so you can be the market and be like, well, I'm not really looking for your Snapcaster Mages. I don't need them for a deck, but I'm willing to trade them if you give some throw-ins or whatnot. And that way I've noticed too, with being savvy with just psychology and understanding that people want to make a deal, that they're less reluctant to just end the trade rather than, I'll throw in, these few cards here, or I'll give you the $2 benefit of the doubt of this sort of stuff. So there are a lot of tips and tricks that I learned over the years of before I owned a store of, trading, and it was very successful. I remember that I've told this story too, that when I had my collection stolen, one of the things I was able to do is go from my friends. I was just going to quit Magic. So TLDR, I was selling all of my cards because my dog had cancer and I couldn't afford the surgery. My dog had a tumor that was blocking his large intestine, and it needed to be removed, and the surgery was going to be a couple $1,000s. And so I needed to come up with this money because, like I said, I was dead broke, and I had all my cards in my car, and someone bashed my windows in and stole my cards. And so, a lot of victim blaming occurred at that point. Why did I leave all of my cards in my vehicle even though it was locked? Why did I do that? We can victim blame all day long. The whole reality of life is someone victimized me. My cards were stolen. I had to start back from square one, and I was just going to quit Magic. And my friends convinced me to. They bought me. I remember it was they bought me into the Avacyn Restored pre-release, as well as bought me a event deck. So the event deck at the time was a Birthing Pod deck, and the Avacyn Restored pre-release promo was a Restoration Angel. So right off the bat, I had a pretty decent start to like a what I called Golem Pod. I was able to get a bunch of uncommons and commons. I remember the Birthing Pod deck had some Master Splicers in it. The Restoration Angel synergized with that. I was able to pick up a few other odds and ends, and started playing some FNMs. Won some FNMs. I remember at the time the FNM promo was Lingering Souls that was traded for $10, and I took that initial winnings from the pre-release, then the event deck, and then being able to take down some FNMs with a super budget deck, and take that and start trading. And I went from having no collection within a year, having back up to a couple $1,000 collection, and having a lot of surplus to start building these decks. And so it can be done, is what I'm trying to say. And these are the tips and tricks to do so. So, man, kind of went off on a tangent here rather than talking about reserve lists, but I hope everyone enjoyed these sort of story times. Now I do own a store, and I don't do flipping cards as much as I used to because it's just not pound for pound the best use of my time. It's a lot easier for me to find, as being an actual store, it's a lot easier for me to spend money for distributor cost pricing and then sell it MSRP to, locals and other people. That for me is a better outlet, but everyone doesn't have that sort of outlet. So there are tips and tricks to managing your collection. So the TLRD of this is reserve list is a good time to look at these cards that are at their six month low. You got to assume that they're going to spike up in price again. And if you can sell at that spike, absolutely do sell at that spike. But if you can't sell at that spike, realize that it is going to come back down and you should probably be trying to get out of it within that next 6 months. And then it will come back down and rinse and repeat. These things are cyclical. They follow the calendar of when tax returns come in. It also seems to be at this time period of the year that Magic is at its kind of boring time period. This whole spring into summer, standards already usually solved. A lot of times there aren't a lot of modern and pioneer and legacy tournaments going on. Their commander set has come out, so Commander has a bunch of the focal point. And so people still want to be buying stuff. They still want to be, playing Magic. And so this is when the focus a lot of times goes towards sealed products and reserve list. This is that chunk where we see both of those, where we consider the more investment products being purchased. And so there will be some price spikes, especially if we do get another stimulus check that is in the works right now. It looks like it's going to be a thing. This last stimulus check definitely did negate all of the economic impact of the pandemic, where we saw that actually many of the metrics in Magic the Gathering have gone up rather than we had that initial 35% decrease, which probably had more to do with mysteries just hitting everything across the board than it really did with the economic downturn. And then the stimulus check, though, did seem to be completely recovering all of the losses. And it's just not Magic the Gathering. It's across the board with Pokemon, Force of Will, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Have had major price increases for their sealed product and the more what we consider investable products, as people are bored and have excess money right now to actually spend on things. So anyway, we'll keep an eye on the market. We'll keep talking about this specific thing. I know I've rambled excessively in this video, but I hope everyone likes the story time and a little bit of insider on how my mind works and how my situation has led me to some unique just outlooks on Magic the Gathering and MG Finance. This has been Kevin with Rogue Deck Builder. Be sure to, if you haven't, just subscribe to my Gone Rogue Game channel where I talk about products, or my Rogue Market channel where I give more financial advice. Be sure to check out those channels and give it a thumbs up and a subscribe. Thanks for watching.